appreciate you coming on. How do you say your first name? Because I didn't want to butcher it because it's like
most Americans add a second syllable to my name, but no, it's one like rail, railway line.
Rail. Okay.
Rail, yeah.
Rael Bricker. What is that? What's the meaning
My
behind
grandfather was Lithuanian.
that? Okay.
And he died before I was born, and his name was Israelis Brickerus. And so Israelis got shortened to Rail.
Okay. So are you from Lithuania or are you born in
I'm
Australia?
3/4 Lithuanian, but grew up in South Africa.
South
I
Africa?
was born in South Africa and moved to Australia 23 years ago.
Okay. Why the switch?
I didn't see a future raising my kids in South Africa.
Yep.
Yeah, just didn't see that that there would be opportunities for my kids growing up in South Africa. It was a different place to where I'd grown up already. It had changed so dramatically, in some ways for the better, because we now had a democratic government. But even 30 years later, or 25 years later, the government are still blaming the previous government for every problem that occurs.
Sounds
And
like
that's
the US.
not a great environment to be growing up in.
No. What part exactly are you at now?
I'm in Perth, on the west coast of Australia.
Okay. Why Australia, not America?
Good question. America was never an issue. As a South African citizen and passport holder, getting into America was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Unless you won the green card lottery, pretty much you couldn't get in. We actually had papers for Canada and for Australia, and we spent a bit of time in the snow in Canada and went, nah, that's not the way to live your life. In 6 months, 8 months of cold. So, our temperature doesn't go below freezing here. Winters are maybe 60 Fahrenheit. Cold winter's day would be 60 degrees, 55 degrees.
Okay. Yeah, lovely. So with the being in Australia now, how's with the pandemic and whatnot? Is that kind of gone away, or are they still kind of?
Well, we're in Perth. We're a couple of months behind because we had no COVID for 2 years. We sealed off from the rest of the world. We had 0 COVID cases for almost 2 years. Now they've opened the border up. We have, I don't know, 8,000 cases a day, but it's gone from pandemic to endemic. It's gone just a way of life now.
Yeah. Why? What was the difference between Perth and everyone else that made you guys?
Because we're the most isolated city in the world, most isolated capital city in the world. So our government just shut our borders, basically.
Okay. Are you guys just on an island? Because I'm not very familiar with where you're at.
No. We're on the west coast, but it's closer for me to fly to Bali or Singapore than it is to Sydney.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, I want to get into your book here pretty soon, but let's give me a little, if you would, a little rundown on your background and your business career, because it's quite the resume from what I've been reading up on it, and give the audience a little bit takeaway, a little bit of who you are.
Okay, so so my background is, I'm fairly academic in terms of having lots of qualifications, but that doesn't define me because those were over 30 years ago. My first business, I'm an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. Started my first business 6 months after I was married, which is always not a good thing. Sometimes when you walk in and say to your wife, darling, I'm giving up my full-time job and I'm going out to be an entrepreneur. The funny part about that business was that I was a 26-year-old MBA graduate. My business partner was a 26-year-old MBA, and we thought we'd go out and teach the world how to run their businesses. The problem is we'd never run a business ourselves. But that didn't stop us. I mean, the bizarre thing is we didn't even see that as a limitation. And today, in a lot of my coaching and consulting work, when people talk about, limitations, they talk about imposter syndrome. And I go, at 26, I went to the major corporations in South Africa and thought I could tell them how to do things better. It was just, there was no boundaries, okay? I mean, we started that business by coincidence. It morphed into an education business. It was at the right place at the right time. Nelson Mandela had just been released. There was a major yearning in South Africa for education. We started an education business, and that education business morphed into 6 campuses and 4,000 students. And then we reverse listed that on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in 1996. So in 6 years, we grew to 6 campuses, 4,000 students, and we owned a 5,000 square meters, so 50,000 square foot building in downtown Johannesburg, where we housed our head office and another couple colleges. After that, I went into venture capital because we went into this listed company. We then acquired 9 other businesses. So we grew it from a 90-cent share to a 16 Rand share at the time. I exited the business and I went into venture capital because that made most sense. That's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Did that for a couple of years in South Africa. Then 99 moved to Australia and got involved with another venture fund here. It was an $8 million fund, a tiny little fund. We grew it to 22 million. And then they wanted me to move to Sydney, and I made a lifestyle decision that the West Coast is a cool place to live. And so I stayed on the West Coast and started consulting on my own. And then people asked me to organize a mortgage for them. And I went, I have no idea how to do it, but I'll work it out. And I did. And that business I still own. And that business has done 3 billion in mortgages over those 22 years. So that's been a bit of a fun ride. It's paved the way for a lot of things. And 9 years ago, I was training for a marathon. And that was probably the turning point in my life. I was training for a marathon and I ended up having 2 cardiac stents. I was getting neck pain every time I ran. And they discovered that I had 2 blockages, ended up with 2 stents, no heart attack, thankfully. But it also focused me on doing what I want to do and what I do best. And so in my mortgage business, I had sold over $1 billion in mortgages from stage. I'd been on stage talking to people about mortgages, finance, retirement, property. But I'd found a technique of explaining things in words of one syllable or simple words. And I wasn't talking in bank talk that most people were scared of because they didn't understand bank talk. And so that's how that business evolved. And I went, I want to be on stage. And so 9 years ago, I started this transition from mortgage broker, finance broker to a professional speaker. And today I'm one of 1,500 certified speaking professionals in the world. So I still speak professionally, but I still also own the mortgage business. And I'm currently president of Professional Speakers Australia in Western Australia.
Right on. Right on. So on the mortgage side, is that just all residential, commercial, all of the above?
All of the above, and equipment finance. So vehicles, we funded some massive custom built trailers this week for clients in the pest control business. Doesn't really matter. Anything rolling stock, they call it. So anything with wheels. I have funded generators for farms, in that respect. Obviously, residential property, commercial property, all those things. But so that business does probably 99% of its business is residential mortgages, though.
Do you are you just in Australia with that, or are you around the globe?
No, just in Australia. It's too complicated. We have 61 lenders that we deal with just in Australia. And that's about a third of the market. So to go outside of Australia would just be crazy. We deal with non-residents who are buying property in Australia. But no, to originate mortgages outside of Australia would just be a whole different nightmare.
Well, you said a percentage were in Australia. What percentage is that based off? Like the entire world?
Oh, yeah. So there's about 200 or 300 lenders in Australia.
Okay.
We deal with about 61, 62 of them,
Okay.
which covers pretty much the whole spectrum of lending. But, just dealing with 61 lenders and keeping up with their policies is enough. To try and do that internationally would just be impossible.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's crazy. So, um, what was the reason behind the marathon? Were you just trying to get out of your comfort zone, push yourself, or
Yeah,
just
I just done a season of triathlons. I just done a season of triathlon, and
oh
I
nice.
decided, yeah, what's the next step from doing, Olympic distance triathlons? Let's go and do a marathon. And so, yeah, I've always been a sportsman. I was a state level hockey player, and that's the grass hockey, not ice hockey. Because when I say hockey to anyone in North America, they think of ice hockey. I played grass hockey from high school, and when I was 21, I represented the state in hockey. I for two seasons I represented the state, and then I broke a kneecap, which kind of put me out of it. And so for 27 years, I never played hockey, but I did individual sports. So I always did things like running, cycling, swimming, and that was what took me to triathlons. I wanted to do it all before I was 50. It's kind of this midlife crisis. And
Yeah,
so the marathon was something I wanted to do before I turned 50.
nice.
Um,
Did
but
what was your time on that
I
marathon?
never did the marathon because the surgeon
Oh,
stopped me and told my wife I wasn't allowed to do it because he just fixed my heart.
oh, interesting. What are stints? Because I'm not familiar with that. Is that what they
Oh,
call them?
so yeah, so stents are what's the best description to describe them? Stent is a tube of metal, or it's actually a mesh that they put in through your groin or your wrist, and they put it up through your arteries to the point where you have a blockage. And so they balloon the artery, they blow it out to get rid of the blockage, and they put um, this mesh inside it that allows you to um, basically hold your artery open where there was previously a blockage.
Hmm.
So it's an
Interesting.
amazing technology. 10 years before that, I would probably have had to have open heart surgery to repair the damage.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's crazy.
I
Um,
just need to close the door because I hear my team starting to arrive because it's 8 a.m. in the morning.
that's fine.
And then the coffee machine will be going. And that makes a noise because it grinds the coffee.
Yeah, no big deal. How many employees you got there at your office? No,
12.
12. Okay,
Yeah.
and
So
that's all mortgage.
although at the moment they're decimated because of COVID. So
Mm.
half of them are either at home in isolation or they've tested positive, and so they're spending 7 days at home working from home until they come back to the
Yeah.
office next week. Yeah.
How's the dynamic with working at home versus in the office, and how has the productivity been?
My team are quite committed, and so that makes a big difference to the productivity. We set up at the beginning of COVID. I mean, I've always been able to work remotely because I've traveled. So 2019, as a professional speaker, I spent 5.5 months traveling the world, but still managing to work and communicate with the office. So I set up that remote technology. Then once COVID came in, we set it up for everyone in the office. And so, yeah, my staff are free to come and go as they want. Most of them actually enjoy the vibe of being in the office. We have big offices, we have a lot of space between people. So they're not feeling, that there's someone's breathing over them and they're going to get COVID. Culturally, so we do some weird things, and this is one of the great things I work with companies on. June the 30th is the end of the financial year in Australia. So last year, June the 30th, we were in a lockdown, and all my staff were working at home. And traditionally, we've always got together for drinks in a financial services company on the last day of the financial year. So I called up one of the bottle shops, the liquor outlets, and I arranged, because we always have gin in the office, gin and tonics, and two of my staff don't drink alcohol, so we have alcohol-free gin for them. And I organized a delivery to everyone's house for that afternoon of a bottle of gin and 4 bottles of tonic. And I sent them all a Zoom meeting to say, we're having drinks, bring your own, but I didn't tell them about the delivery. And for about an hour before the meeting, started getting these texts. Did you send alcohol? And I went, I don't know. And then everyone arrived and everyone had the same drinks. It was a really cool thing. So you do that kind of stuff to build morale. You to build a culture that surpasses whether you're in the same office.
Yeah.
We have very active WhatsApp groups with the team, jokes flying, banter flying all the time.
Yeah. Is that like your one of the best ways to communicate with the team is through WhatsApp? You like that the most?
Yeah, we use WhatsApp a lot, just because everyone has it. That's the main rationale. Is it's easy. We use it all the time. People will always, put banter and memes and jokes out, so it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. And on the teamwork side of it, because I just got done with an interview from a woman who came from a corporate background in the oil industry, and she was in kind of in an area. Just the structure of it was basically everyone's competing with each other, and not really in a good way. And so it kind of created a lot of tension between a lot of people. So how important is teamwork to create, that morale and that positivity versus
It's amazing. It is everything. So, in fact, I talk about the WhatsApp group, but so I have two offices, one in Perth. Well, I have my main office in Perth. I have brokers working in that office, and I have brokers working across town in Perth as well at another office, and I have brokers on the East Coast in Brisbane, which is a 6-hour flight. So imagine LA to New York kind of distance. And so there are often WhatsApps, besides the jokes and the memes, saying, hey, I've got this client, this is the scenario. What do you guys think is the best lender for them? And so it's an incredibly helpful and reaching out environment that we work in.
Yeah. Being able to ask for help, right? Because that's super
Yeah.
important.
So it's actually in one of the chapters of my book where I talk about, an expert is not someone who knows the answer. An expert is someone who's prepared to admit they don't know the answer, but knows where to find the answer and will go out and get it for the person.
Yep, 100%, 100%. That exchange of value in between people, and the willingness to humble yourself and say, hey, I don't know, but I am willing to find out and ask people, and if I can exchange value in the process, great. And if not, hopefully I can help them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the principles I've taught all my team over the last many years, is that it's okay to say, I don't know. I do that often. I mean, we have 61 lenders, right? So just on that side of the business, and I said my focus at the moment is probably 50% of my time is as a speaker and mentor and consultant. But even then, so 61 lenders each have, let's call it a minimum of 5 products. That's 300 different mortgage products. There's no way any client could ever expect my staff to know 300 interest rates and 300 terms and conditions off the top of their head. But there is a belief out there that you should know it all. And when I train my staff, and I've trained many staff over the years, and I've said to them, it's okay to say to the client, we have over 300 products. I don't know the detail of every product, but I'll come back to you by lunchtime tomorrow with the exact answer that you've asked me. And that's not only a commitment, it's also a good marketing strategy, because the client then feels that you're doing a lot of work on their behalf. And so that's also good for client relationships, but it also is a good humbling thing to say, I don't know all the rest. I still see clients. I've got such longevity in this business that I now have grandchildren of clients from 20 years ago coming to see me. So I've done the parents, the grandparents, the parents, and now the kids' loans. And I'll do that often. I'll say, look, the rate is approximately 3%. I don't know what it is, but I'll confirm with you by email tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Very, very simple strategy. It's great for morale. It's great for working with clients.
Yeah, yeah. And on the flip side of that, you're coming off as human, right? And most people can relate with that. They don't want to be, pitched a bunch of stuff in a way that just seems spammy. And, if you're wrong, you come back, you know, with that mistake. And also, no one really cares. I have no problem with people being, when it comes to loans and stuff, like, hey, I don't know. Let me find out, get the correct information so I don't mix it up. And I'm like, perfectly fine. Get back with me in the next, couple hours or maybe day. Not a big deal. And yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
Well, one of the biggest mortgage businesses in Australia for many years ran this advertising campaign that went something like this. It went, firstly, I'm a big advocate of mortgage brokers not doing home visits because I have 2 master's degrees. I'm more qualified than your doctor, your lawyer, and your accountant. Why would any of those 3 go and visit you at home? Why should the mortgage broker? And so for 20 odd years, I'm a fellow of the industry. I've been advocating to stop home visits, to only have visits in offices. So that's just a personal view of the world. But this large company would advertise that said, our brokers will come out to your house. They will enter all your details on their laptop, and the laptop and the software will tell you which is the best mortgage product for you, which sounds great and high tech, but nothing in that advertising campaign told you how good their person was. It told you how good they were at entering data and how good their software was. There was nothing personal in that. My team, after 22 years and all the technology, never use a computer in front of the client. They use pen and paper. They draw things out using colored pens. In fact, with the pandemic and whatever, we created the technology with a second camera using OBS software, where the second camera sits on a desk and looks down at a black sheet of paper, and we have fluoro colored pens. And the broker, if they're talking to somebody over Zoom or Hangouts or whatever it may be, or Teams or whatever it is, writes on this black piece of paper under a camera, but they can still see their little image on the top corner of the screen. And that really gives them a way of doing exactly what we do sitting face to face, but over technology.
That's cool. By the way, I have never heard of anybody coming to your house to do a mortgage.
Yeah, that's used to be very common in Australia.
Not in the US.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. So that was where I looked at it and I went, I joined the industry when only 17% of mortgages were actually written by brokers. 83% people were going into their local branch of the bank. And so brokers in those days, before I even joined the industry, were trying to create a niche, a way of saying, come to us. Well, we'll make the process easy. We'll come to your house and do it. Yeah. And interestingly, the big banks actually then had mobile lenders. The mobile lenders would actually, instead of you coming into the branch, would actually come to your house as well. So that was the trend that started, 22 years ago. To put that into context, there was 17% of mortgages. It's now 70% that are written by brokers, and only 30% are written by bank staff.
And well, on the flip side of that too, as a business, I don't know how they can afford to send one guy out there because, a broker or someone at the bank doing loans is working on 5, 6, maybe 10. I don't know how many they can work on at a time. And you can't really do that at someone's house though. Yeah.
Yeah. But the truth of it is I have a team that looks after the paperwork. So I haven't done a home visit for 15 years. But I have a team. So I will even now see a client. I will send an email summary to the client after our meeting that I will write as summarizing what we discussed, but that'll go to my team, who will then follow up and send them paperwork and send them, everything they need, privacy consents and all the other things. And then my team will handle the paperwork from there. They will CC me in all the emails so I know what's going on, but we have the processes and systems in place to basically, and again, it's one of the principles that I talk about in the book as well, is is don't bog yourself down doing the $10 an hour admin tasks. Go out and do the $500 an hour revenue generation tasks. And so the economics of broking makes sense when you have the $10 an hour admin behind you. I mean, we do all our processing onshore, in other words, in Australia, but there are a lot of now dedicated processing teams in the Philippines processing mortgages. But even then, doesn't matter. I'm most efficient, and my broker team are most efficient at seeing clients.
Yep.
The admin team are most efficient at shuffling paper.
Yep. Do exactly right. Focus on your strengths or designating that to a specific person, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, when it comes to that, how important are systems and you know, patterns in your company? You know, follow this by the book. You know, because for all the small business owners out there, people getting started, I see this a lot. Is people, you know, they just do it, and then there's no like reason and there's no purpose for it. And so, how important is that, especially being in the brokerage business?
Okay, well, in any business, so I spend a lot of my, I've owned and owned lots of businesses over time, and again, a lot of the work I do with small businesses now and medium businesses is about, you know, optimizing their systems. So first thing I have to say is that a lot of people come to me and they say they want to be entrepreneurs, right? I want to start this business, but I've run 27 spreadsheets and they all tell me that it's not going to work. I go, well, what do the hairs in the back of your neck say? And they say, what's that got to do with it? And I said, do the hairs in the back of your neck rise up and you get excited because you think there's opportunity here? And they go, yeah. I go, that's all you need. You know, the back of my book, the blurb on the back of my book says, sometimes you just need to dive in. Business does not have to be complicated. Business can be simple. Take a breath, dive in, and adjust your course while you're moving. And that's absolutely what I've done in pretty much every business I've ever started and run and sold. So talking of systems, so many years ago in the mortgage business, I had a PA, an assistant, who made a joke one day. She had a pile of 40 files, 40 client files on her desk, which is about the workload of an assistant, about 40 files in a week, about 8 files a day. And she made a joke and said, if this pile hits the ground, she's resigning before it hits the ground. Okay. And I thought about it, and I watched her process, and I'd go to her every day. She was my only PA at the time. And certain files just got pushed down the pile all the time. And I looked at what they were, and they were the hard files. And so all she was doing was pre-selecting the easy ones and making her workload easy. And so I came up with a system which is simplicity itself. And it was called the Monday to Friday system. And so I set up a whiteboard next to her desk with 5 columns called Monday to Friday, and a bookshelf next to her desk with 5 shelves called Monday to Friday. And so on Monday, she'd look up the file, she'd pick up Jonathan's file and go, yep, I've sent off what I need to the bank, and the bank have told me they'll answer me on Wednesday. So she'd send Jonathan an email, saying, hey, Jonathan, I've just spoken to the bank. I expect an answer on Wednesday. She would go to her whiteboard, write Jonathan under the Wednesday column, and go and physically put your paperwork on her shelf called Wednesday. And once you've got the system going, now that pile of 40 files is down to 8 per day on 5 different shelves. And so when she walks in the morning, she only takes 8 files off her desk. There's nowhere to hide. There's only 8 files that she has to deal with on that day. And if she's sick, now that we have a much bigger team, when any team member's sick, it's very easy for someone else to walk in and go, those are the files that have to be dealt with today. Let's distribute them. Interestingly, with the pandemic, with people say, and also lockdowns being called, like you'd be at home on a Sunday morning and suddenly there'd be a lockdown called from Sunday night. So no one could come into the office to collect stuff. We had to be much more flexible. So first thing we did was we took our whiteboards and duplicated them on Trello. And so everyone now has a Trello board that I can access as well, but they can access from home. So what was on their whiteboard, their Monday to Friday work, is now on an electronic version on Trello. and all the files are scanned onto the server and they can log in and see the information. So we've gone from, but everybody still prefers their whiteboard. So when we're in the office like we are now, they still write names on the whiteboard and use the shelves. But the electronic version of it exists there. So sometimes we overthink systems. I spend a lot of time with companies saying, if you can't describe your company process on one page, or one letter size page, your systems are too complicated.
Yeah.
Quite simple. You know, how do you onboard a new employee if you've got a 28-page manual of flow charts of how things work? You're never going to be able to onboard and bring staff on quickly. You've got to be able to bring your process, and business, no business is that complicated. You know, yes, you know, like banking, there may be, you know, if, then, why, what, whatever, but don't make that part of your big. I went to one bank. They had a floor to ceiling 7 or 8 foot by about 4 foot wide diagram of how their process worked. And I said to them, it's too complicated. That should be one page on someone's desk, and each block might represent another page. That's okay. But let them start with the basics.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing with that Monday to Friday thing is clarity. And once you get clarity and you know exactly what you got to do, your mind frees up. You get in a better spot. You kind of de-stress, and then you just focus. All right, I got this to do today. Let me take one step at a time. And I love that Monday through Friday system. It's cool.
Well, the other thing it allowed me to do was to walk in every day as the boss. And obviously, when I'm not in town, it doesn't work that way. But when I am in town, and sit down at everyone's desk in the morning. So for 2 reasons. One is to assess how they are, like physically, how are you today? And my staff in the other cities, I call them every day just to say, how are you doing? Everything okay? Go into FaceTime or Zoom. Let me see what you look like. Let me see your eyes. But I'd be able to sit down with a staff member and look at their whiteboard and go, tell me about Smith, Jones, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about Jonathan's file. What problems are you having that I can help you solve? So that would take up the first hour of my day, but everybody, I've given them my undivided attention, and I've helped them solve problems that'll make their day easier.
Love it. I love it. When you're working with and consulting businesses, is that overthinking like one of the biggest things? Because I know it is with a lot of people I've seen, just with the systems and everything's complicated, and you know, just kind of because it is like people think everything is so complicated, but what I found out in with my business career is that, you know, it's as simple as, you know, writing a reminder, taking a note, you know, being specific on the instructions, and it equates all the way from what job I'm doing, from a $60,000 pool to a $500,000 pool, doesn't matter. So it's simplicity is really at the key. So
Absolutely. It's just about, and so you combine the simplicity with the environment that says it's okay to ask a question, then nobody feels pressure. I mean, I you know, after most of my broking staff and my admin staff have been here, you know, 8 to 15 years. So they're well experienced, but yet on a daily basis, we'll still have a huddle, you know, around, you know, mid-morning, where we'll just sit around having coffee, you know, sit in the kitchen, have coffee, and talk about what are you as a group. So this is not me individually problem solving. This is bringing the whole group into it. You know, while we're having coffee, are you having any challenges with ABC's file? Let's deal with it.
I love it. I love it. That's a it's something I want to get to. It's kind of difficult right now for me in a way that well, maybe I haven't seen it, but I'm on the field, you know, every day. So because I'm a you know, team leader for the building all of our stuff. So, but being able to have those meetings like that, sometimes, you know, I'm just pushing real hard, especially with weather. It's raining, you know, sunshine. I'm working hard, getting it done. But I love that team aspect, you know, getting in there, solving problems. We do get together once a week right now, talking about what we got, what pools we got coming up, any problems. But it is funny because I do work. Me and my brother are partners. He's 51%. I'm 49 in the pool company because he's older, and I guess he says he earns more, he deserves more, whatever. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. But questions with him, it's very interesting because I ask a lot of questions, good questions, because I want to understand it, and he hates it. It's so funny. He's just like my dad, because my dad passed away 2 years ago. Then that's why we're partners, because we just kind of built our own company, and it's quite comical. But I and when I because I train all my guys, all the guys that work on the job, I train them, and you can't ask too many questions. You got a problem, I want to know, because if you I don't want you, like, I don't mind you messing up a little bit and learning, but I don't want you to be clueless to the problem. And I want to have given you the information, the adequate information for you to solve that problem. So that's one of the biggest reasons want you to ask questions, because at the end of the day, it's going to be on me, and I want to have a part in that.
Well, it's interesting. So there's actually again, I keep referring to the book, but there's a chapter in the book called "Never Ask Your Staff to Do Anything That You Wouldn't Do." Now that sounds pretty simplistic, like, yeah, whatever. But I meet so many bosses who think that they're special now, and don't, as you said, you're out on site every day, and you may not necessarily do a particular job anymore. You've trained somebody to do it, but they know you can do it. Maybe not even as well as them. I think that's the other thing is bosses are afraid to actually get their hands dirty sometimes. Yes, it's not the most productive use of your time, but they're afraid to get their hands dirty in case the staff realize that they're not very good at it. But that's okay. They've got their hands dirty. That, from a morale, from a motivation point of view, is almost much more important. And turning around and saying, I'm not as good as you at doing this, but I'm happy to get in there with you. Now, but that said, as a boss, so there was a TV show called Billions. It's a fairly big series at the moment. And the one character, and so when I'm on planes, this is my story. When I'm on airplanes and I travel a lot, I'm always listening to some series in the background while I have my laptop and I'm working. And I often pick up quotes out of the series, which is interesting because they're totally fictitious. But I'll pick up a quote and I'll go, hang on, there's a blog that comes out of that, and I'll stop and I'll rewind and I'll make a verbatim note on the laptop, and I'll forget about it. And a week or two later, I'll go back and I'll write a blog or an article or record a video based on that quote. So I was on a plane, and the one character in Billions, Taylor Mason, is talking to a Russian investor. Probably not the most politically correct thing to talk about right now, but anyway, talking to this Russian investor, and he says something to her, and she says, "No, I'll be down there in the trenches with the troops fighting." And he turns around and he says, there's a concept of why leaders, generals, have sidearms and not rifles. It's because they have to stand on top of the mountain with their arms, but put their arms away and survey the big scene. Whereas the troops down in the trenches, very World War I analogy, have rifle sights that are very narrow, and they only have a very narrow view of the world. And so you, as the manager, they have to know that you can get into the trench and shoot the rifle, but they also know that you're going to spend most of your time on top of the mountain with the binoculars surveying the whole scene. And that's the difference between, call it the worker and the manager, or the leader and the manager. And so I love that analogy. I wrote a couple blogs, did a few videos on it. And I use that story on stage quite a lot, talking about that. But that's, exactly what I think is the epitome of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's an awesome quote. But and along with that note, just for instance, my guy, and for the record, I love it when my employees are better at me at something, better than me at something than I am. Because first off, I love delegating, and If you can do it, like, hey, no problem, you can do it. I have no problem letting go. And second, it gives them confidence. And because a lot of times when I'm training a guy, I don't mess up a whole lot because I've done it for a long time, and so they'll be messing up, messing up, messing up, and then when they find something that they're better at than you, it gives them a confidence, and then I make sure they know it. Like my guy, he's better at facing steps because on our vinyl liner pools, we face pull, strip our forms and face our concrete really good, so everything's nice and clean and flat, and he's better at it than me, and I make sure he knows it. I tell him he does really good work, and get a little bit of encouragement there, and we have a good kind of a relationship there. But no problem admitting when I'm not that good at something. But because I would love to delegate, for sure. But that's kind of the way I like to do it.
Yes, I mean, but the interesting thing there is you can do it if you had to.
Mhm.
Okay, and
Right.
so I've seen guys start a business where they actually don't have the skill to do it, right? So they have this view of, don't worry, I'll just pay people, and I'll pay them a bit more than the industry so that they have loyalty. And I don't think pay breeds loyalty at all. I don't
Yep.
think money has anything to do with loyalty. I think it's a negative if you don't pay people enough. But I don't think, there's a lot of the work I do around culture in larger organizations. And there is a lot of work being done right now that people will forego salary to work at a company with a great culture. We're not talking about foregoing a lot of salary, but they will take 10% less in salary to work at an organization with a great culture. And so, but they won't take 50% less. That's the point. There is that trade-off that you find with people.
Yeah.
So, but when I see people who buy a company or start a company and believe that and if you're a general manager and you're in a large corporation of 20,000 people, you don't expect the general managers or the managers to be able to do every task. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're in a small business, 10 people, 20 people, up to probably 30 or 40 or even 50 people, you can't be held over a barrel by somebody who's an expert that you don't have that expertise yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as you do that, then you lose the real essence of the business, and everyone else in the business knows that you're beholden to this employee because of their expertise.
Yep. Yep. And well, my thoughts on that is, I mean, you've been around it longer than I have, but as a business owner, I feel like you should have at least um, done it. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons is because if you read the book, The Toyota Way, part of the come up to be in a leadership role in the Toyota company is you have to literally touch every single piece of the company. And it makes it so great because once you've got that understanding, right? Like something happens in the in a section where they're just putting pieces on conveyor belt, whatever it is, but they've been there and they understand the situation, even though it's minor, but they get it because they've done it. And instead of just someone who comes in and just is not understanding, it does create a better work environment, of also a better system. But I don't know. I mean, you can have it both ways. I'm assuming. What's your experience in that? I mean, would you prefer someone to know what they're doing when you're working with them? And they've done it, or do you? What do you find in
Well,
that when you're coaching?
I'll give you the classic. And again, I'm busy exiting the mortgage business or exiting now that the pandemic is finished. I'm going back to speaking probably 6 months of the year outside of the mortgage business. But last year, about November, so 2021, middle of the pandemic, we decided to switch our software system. So we had a hard switch over. It was a Wednesday night. They literally turned off the old system. It was backed up, so in case there was a problem, but turned off on a Wednesday night. Thursday morning, the staff arrived. They were on the new system. The first thing I did on the Thursday morning was I walked in and I said, okay, give me a file that has to be entered on the new system and lodged with a lender. And they said, why? And I said, because I want to see the problems in the software. This is going to be the first and probably last file that I'm going to ever enter on the system. But I want to go through the process so that when you come to me with a problem and I go to the software provider, I can actually go to them with, yes, I have a master's in software engineering. So I have a good software understanding, but I wanted to actually understand the process of the problems you're going through.
Yeah.
And so I sat there for the first day, that Thursday, and I typed with, for 6 fingers, and I typed out the entire application and got it to the point of submission to a lender. It's the last time I've done that, and probably the first time I've done that in 15 years. Yeah. But the staff appreciated the fact that I went through the same pain they were going through on the same day. Yeah. And we got to an understanding where we went, okay. We're all on the same page. We understand these are the problems. And then now I'll say to them, what's going on? They'll go, yeah, this is an issue we're having. I'll go, okay, let me sit with you now and let's try and solve the problem of that problem on the software, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't been through the process.
Right, right. And do you think that businesses business owners are more successful because they have been in the trenches, so to speak, and understand those small things versus people who own companies that they really have no idea what's going on, but they are relying on people to kind of manage that for them?
Yeah, so one of the companies I consulted to actually back in South Africa, let me rephrase that. I went to South Africa to consult to a company, and while I was there, I was also doing some motivational training for another company. So while I was there, I was at this company, and I said to the and they only had 240 staff, so not a huge organization. Their main business was distribution of high or medium range watches. Okay, and so high value but low volume was the business. So a store down the road would order 1 of that model and 2 of that model and 3 of that model, and it would be packaged and shipped. So it wasn't packaging thousands of items at the same time. So I turned around to them and I said, is there a better way of running your distribution? Because right now you're telling me you have a 25% staff turnover in your distribution. And they said, well, yeah, we don't really know. And I said, okay, well, when did you last ask the people on the floor packing goods if there was a better way to do things? And they said, oh, we've never done that. And I said, when did you last take your lunch, your sandwich, and go down and lunchtime and sit in the break room in the warehouse? And I said, the first time you do it, they'll look at you like, what are you doing here spying on us? But the second or the third time you go down there and you ask them questions about, is there a better way to do what you do? Can I make your job easier? What could I do to make your job easier and our business more efficient? You'll start getting answers. And at the time, they said to me, we rely on our supervisors to give us this information. I said, yes, but you're not asking for the information. And you're not showing yourself to be visible management. You're not, in Japan in the 70s, they coined the term management by walking around. And, we're large corporates, the managers would be forced to walk onto the floor like Toyota and actually go and talk to all the team members. These guys that were 4th generation in the business, 4th generation managers. So they, hadn't actually even been in the trenches. And it was amazing. It took about 6 months, and I was at a company function, and they were starting to talk about culture and our value system and our purpose in life. And so all the things I've been working with them on were now being communicated to the team.
Right on, right on. You are you familiar with Marcus Lemonis?
No.
Oh, he's an American businessman, but he's he's awesome. He has a show called The Profit.
Oh, now okay. I do watch The Profit because it is here on pay TV. I just never put his surname together. And as you mentioned it, I went, I'm pretty sure that is The Profit, but I'll
Yeah.
let you carry on with the sentence.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. I've learned a lot from his show, and that's part of his I love watching him go into these businesses, and people just are floored by just the most simple things. Just asking the guy who runs the cutting machine, "Hey man, like what would you do better?" And then he gives them like this whole list, and the owners are just looking at him, and it makes him kind of look silly because like it didn't take you but 5 minutes of your day to go down there and figure out how you could have made 50, 100, 200 grand in a year's time just by going down investing couple minutes, 30, 10, 20, 30 minutes a day or even a week, just talking to your employees and seeing how you could improve it. And there's back to the simplicity of it, right?
Yeah,
Just
absolutely. It is about it's about just keeping things simple. We overcomplicate everything in our lives. I mean, even in I've got a great friend of mine, professional speaker here in Perth, who's a relationships. She does a lot of work with relationships, personal relationships counseling, and she says most problems come about people trying to communicate or in ways that are not simple. And so sometimes just sitting down, facing a person and saying, what are you feeling? What do you do? And that applies in equally in business. That's exactly what Marcus does. He walks into a business and looks at it with a set of clean eyes and goes, hang on a second, that person is doing this repetitive task of pressing the red button on the machine every day. Now let's see if I could move the button from there to there, he's not going to get a sore arm. And is that going to make a difference to him? Ask him the question. What could I do to make your life better? And it's, move this button down to here so my wrist can be on the table and not up in the air all the time. I mean, I just made that example up, but
right.
but that's the simplicity of what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick here, Mr. Bricker, how much time do you got left? Because we've been going for about 53 minutes.
Yeah, my next meeting's in an hour, so I'm pretty chilled.
Okay, sweet.
I've
I
had
know
at least 2 coffees today, so I'm good.
perfect. We've gone over, I'm sure, a lot of principles in the book because I haven't got my copy yet, but I've been so busy with the baby. I just had a baby and everything, so it's been chaos around my house right now. So, but when give me like or give the audience here a little introduction because then I kind of want to go into some principles of the book, even though we've gone through over a lot, I'm sure, because you keep relating it back to it. But just give like an introduction of the book and kind of an overview of what it is, real quick for me.
Okay, so the book is called Dive In: Lessons Learned Since Business School. It was really me sitting down. So a bit of the story. So I mentioned that in 2013, I had the stents and I wanted to become a professional speaker. So my first real professional speaking gig was 2015 at a mortgage conference, as it so happened. And I spoke about, and they asked me to talk about how did I build up my businesses. So at that point, I'd done over 2 billion in mortgages. I've subsequently done over 3 billion, but at that point, we'd done up to 2 billion in mortgages. And so I went and I wrote up something and I called it Tips and Traps from the Trenches. Okay. And it was 10 business principles. It was pretty stupid and probably immature of me. And I didn't understand the speaking industry enough to try and cover 10 points in an hour. There was a lot of material to cover, but I delivered it. It went down really well. They asked me to do it the second time the next day. I did that and I got onto the plane on the way home and I thought, maybe there's a book in that. Let me start writing it. And I started writing up the detail behind each of the 10 points, but bringing in the stories of my life, my business, things I had done. And so I wrote for about 9 months after that. Every morning, got up at 5, wrote for half an hour, then went off to gym and did exercise, whatever. And then I got imposter syndrome badly. And I went, no one wants to hear my story. So I put the book away. That was late 2015. In 2017, when I was in South Africa doing that consulting work that I spoke about earlier, I caught up with a cousin and his wife for dinner, and she had been a book buyer for a major book chain for 25 years and had just left to start her own publishing business. So I said, look, I've written this manuscript of about 30,000 words. I'm going to send it to you. You're the only person who's read it besides my daughter, who is in marketing, and she's a creative and does a lot of copywriting. And I said, tell me what you think. Is it worth publishing? And she came back to me about a week later and said, it's too short because it needs another 10,000 words, because when we edit, we're going to cut out 5,000 and write 10,000 more words, and we'll publish it. And so that was in 2017 and beginning of 2017. And by May 2018, we published the book.
Right on.
And then I've published an ebook since then, which is only available on my through my websites. It's a free download. I don't sell it. It's got an ISBN, it's registered, all those things. And a third book is in progress on culture. So that's the sort of book publishing story. But the Dive In, which was published, it's available on Amazon, it's available on Kindle, Booktopia, and all the other stores, is really my stories around business and what I learned. And a lot of people who've read the book have said, wow, I didn't learn from every story, but I learned enough to apply one or two things in my business that's made it more efficient.
Awesome. So out of those, out of the most story, out of the whole group, I'd say, of stories that you've learned, because I know you've learned a lot of lessons, over the time of business. What is, kind of like the top 2 or 3 that you've learned that's really kind of driven your business?
Well, so the one was the key actually is about chapter 3 or 4, is called Give Up Control to Gain Control. Okay. And it's really what happened in both the education business in South Africa and the mortgage business here. When I started the mortgage business, I was doing everything. I was seeing the clients, processing the loans, blah, 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 right? And then at some point, I employed my first staff, and we did the same in our education business. And what that did, and I spoke about it very early on with you, was it freed me up to do the stuff I'm really good at, which is out there seeing clients. And so I gave up the control of the back office, of the processing, and I gained control of my own life. That's probably, there's a whole methodology that I talk about in the book, but most entrepreneurs are control freaks, okay?
Yep.
And so you've got to get out of control freak mode, and you've got to actually trust people. So you've got to turn around to someone and go, okay, as you said, you trust people to stuff up and admit it if they've stuffed up. Well, that's okay. So you turn around to someone and say, here's the process. Let me show you the process the first time. Now you do it and ask me if you have a problem. And by the third time, they're just doing it on their own. So I have suddenly given up those hours of my day that I was wasting on those processes to be able to be more efficient, generate more revenue, do stuff. And actually, it's not all about business. It's also about life-work balance. I don't talk about work-life balance. I talk about life-work, because life is important. And so you're generating your own time. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons. In fact, the book was called Give Up Control to Gain Control, until about a month before we published it, and we thought the title was too long. And then we called it Dive In.
Yeah. Actually, you could write that's a whole book for sure, because delegation is, and for scaling, getting big, especially in your growth and how big you are now, especially in the mortgage industry, you apply that old school, that E-Myth, type mentality. If you ever read the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, doing everything yourself. You have to touch everything. You have to see everything. The control freaks, and believe me, I'm a control freak in my own way. But the end of the day, like, I have an understanding that, okay, I've gotten to a point where, all right, I know that person is going to get the job done, and if he does screw it up, like, it's not going to be bad enough to where, like, it's going to take me all the time it would have taken him to do it. So, like, the cleanup is way simpler if he messes it up. And if he doesn't, then good. If he does, then okay, rethink my training a little bit, kind of adapt to it, instruct some more, and then move on. And most people won't do that because they're afraid to mess it up at all. And we just acquired another pool company, and this guy came from nothing, and in the hood down here in Louisville, Kentucky, and he won't hire a plumber. So on all his pools, he touches every single piece of pipe, and he won't, because he doesn't want to, and he doesn't want to grow. He wants to kind of keep his own little deal, and it works for him because that's what he wants. He did about 15 to 30 pools a year, and now he's sold it to us and built a great reputation. And then he's moving to Florida, but that people get scared and giving up control. It's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other one, which is related to that, again, a chapter in the book, and I got to say, in the beginning of the book, there's a quote of mine where I say that sometimes I misunderstand the difference between confidence, overconfidence, and arrogance. Okay, and sometimes I mix them up. But part of that as well is learning to be coachable. And I don't like the word coach because every second person in the world calls himself a coach nowadays. Okay.
Mhm.
But it's about finding mentors in life and in business, and finding mentors that you don't have to have the same mentor for 20 years. A mentor might come into your life for 3 months or one day, doesn't matter. But you So I'm much more of a mentor than I am a coach to people. But it also took me a long time to become coachable, to put my ego and my arrogance and my overconfidence aside and accept that somebody else could help me with a particular aspect of my business. And so I wrote a whole chapter on why having mentors in your life is so important. Why having a mentor is a critical portion of being able to grow. And a mentor as an entrepreneur also just gives you a sounding board. You're in partnership with your brother, but sometimes a third party who's unrelated and has no vested interest in your business, just to say to them, I've been thinking about doing X, Y, Z in the business. What do you think? And they can guide you and motivate you to maybe a better decision, maybe endorsing your decision, doesn't matter. But that mentoring is an amazing process.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Getting that fresh, clean eyes and to look at it. And, that's one of the biggest reasons I started this podcast, is because all these authors are my mentors. And, I've everything I know in business and is transferred over to my relationship, and the way I look at life has been a huge part, a huge, huge, huge part, is contributed to reading books. And, funny enough, I used to hate reading books. And so it's kind of funny how, I used to despise it actually, because felt like it was a waste of time. How that's turned into such a great asset. And when it comes to every single part of the business I run, so the mentor section, if you can get one a live mentor, kind of like this is amazing. And I'm very fortunate to get the authors on. But if reading books is just the next best thing, and for people out there, trying to find that mentor, they can't find it in person. Well, read their book if you found someone, or can apply yourself. It's important.
Absolutely. And there's so much around at the moment, but there is no better. So it does take us putting our ego aside. In order to be coachable or to be mentored, you have to put your ego aside. And I think, and that's a male thing. Males suffer from this problem a lot more than women. And that's not a sexist comment. No, that's not a Me Too movement going to slap me around the ears. Males have a problem putting their ego aside, generally.
Testosterone.
Yeah, absolutely. And once we learn as a society to put our egos aside, we can learn so much from everyone out there. And I, as president of Professional Speakers Australia, I go to lots of professional speakers conventions and meetings, and I never expect to learn. If I go for 6 hours to a conference, I don't expect to learn for 6 hours. I want to take out 5 nuggets from those 6
Mhm.
hours, and then I'm happy because I've done what I set out to do. A
Yep.
friend of mine describes it as he goes to every function and wants a $10,000 idea. Doesn't have to make him $10,000 next week, but he wants an idea that he can implement in his business that might make him $500 a month for the next 2 years. Doesn't matter. But that's how he judges the quality of something he's been to. Did he walk away with a $10,000 idea?
Yep. I quote two people. One, which is I would say the very first mentor I ever had, and that was through YouTube, was Ty Lopez, who got me started on my book journey. And his thing is, what's the one golden nugget that you can get out of a book? And then Mark Cuban has said before, when I pick up a book, I'm looking for that one idea that's going to make either $1 billion or a couple $1,000,000 or move my business one more step forward. And because there's so much information, right? And that's what I've got the trifecta on my shelf right now, and it's 10x by Grant Cardone, The One Thing by Gary Keller, and Good to Great by Jim Collins. And so those books I've read multiple times because each time I read them, I get something new from it. And so people, I went to a conference in Vegas, writing notes, but I already know there's so much information. Picking out what I can, having an objective, right? What's my objective, and then how can I move forward in that? It's a good way to look at it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, so the best, I guess, story to explain why the book's called Dive In, and maybe it's a good point to sort of head to a conclusion, is I was standing on the beach doing those triathlons. And my very first triathlon, I was standing on the beach in a pink bathing cap, which is kind of odd for, the 40 to 49-year age group men. And none of us were professional athletes, And I use athletes in a very inverted commas sort of terminology. I mean, we're standing on the beach, and I suddenly had this epiphany that I'd never done a swim in the sea. I'm like a competitive swim in the sea. All my training had been in the swimming pool. I had a black line to guide me down the bottom of the pool. I had no one kicking me. I wasn't kicking anyone else. And it was neat and orderly. And I was swimming kilometers at a time in the swimming pool. And then I looked at the team, the group, the 30 to 39-year-olds that just went off before us. And I saw guys getting kicked in the head and goggles being knocked off. And they were kicking people behind them. And suddenly I had this epiphany that that's what I've done in life. And that's why it's called Dive In. That sudden, every opportunity, every business I've been into, I dived in. And then I went, let's adjust my course. And so I looked at this on the triathlon and I went, well, what happened? I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to finish. Let me just go and slightly on the outside of the mainstream where it's a bit quieter, but I can find my niche. And then I finished the course. I did my first triathlon, did all the others at this, of that season. And that was really the turning moment in my thinking. There's a book called Blue Ocean Strategies by Rene Mabon and W. Kim Chan. And that book suddenly made sense to me with my triathlons, because all I did was I swam slightly out of the mainstream, and that was the blue ocean and not the red ocean. The red ocean was where everybody else was kicking themselves and kicking everyone else in the head. I was slightly out of that in the blue ocean. And all of this just was perfect clarity standing on the beach that day.
Yeah. And by the way, getting those there's a world of difference between a pool and swimming in either a lake or an ocean. It's complete chaos.
Yeah. And particularly competitive swims where everyone is the funny story of the triathlons was that the one what's called the Australia Day triathlon is done in the river here, not in the sea. But we have a lot of jellyfish in the river, but they don't sting. They're not stinging jellyfish. You can pick them up in your hand and they wouldn't hurt you. But the particular spot they chose to start the triathlon was a wet start. So you walked into the river up until about your waist. Then they shot the gun and you dived in from there. It wasn't the people that you were worried about. It was the jellyfish. You were swimming for the first 100 meters, pulling jellyfish out of your way so you could see where you were swimming. It was just an amazing sort of 50 or 60 meters of just covered in jellyfish. It was obviously a good feeding ground for them or whatever the case may be. and also they also subject to the winds. So the wind had been blowing into that corner, but it was the weirdest experience. And again, you got past them and you were out in the water in the blue ocean. It was actually a great triathlon.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the triathlons you did? How big were they? What was the runs, swim, and bike?
Yeah, so I started out with short course, and my last couple were Olympic distance, which is a quarter Ironman. So hard, so you know, 1 kilometer swim,
Yep.
40-kilometer bike ride, 10-kilometer run, somewhere around those sort of numbers. They varied slightly because they weren't official Olympic distance, but that's an official Olympic distance is a 1 kilometer 40, 140. I don't know them in miles, but 140, 10, because it's a quarter Ironman. So an Ironman would be 4 kilometers swim, 160 kilometer, 180 kilometer bike ride, and then a marathon, which is 40 Ks. So it's exactly a quarter of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to do something like that again. I did 2 triathlons. My first one was 16, and then I did it with a friend of mine. He did the running, he did the biking, I did the swimming and the running. And then the next year we competed against each other, and it was like a 300-meter swim, 12 point some bike ride, and a 5K run.
Yeah, so that would be what they call a sprint distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So
small.
you get a sprint and then you get a something, I can't remember. It's been a long time. It was, 8 years ago. You get a sprint and then something else, then you get Olympic distance, half Ironman and Ironman.
Gotcha.
So something like that.
Yeah, right. Well, we could just wrap this up because it's been an absolute honor and pleasure. And one thing before we do, I ask all my guests this is, what's one book that has been super influential to you, or kind of your top book that you've read and recommend of your own?
Okay, so it's actually interesting. It's not an easy book to read. Well, I'll give you two. How's that? The
That
first
works.
is a business book, which is called Radical Candor. Okay.
Okay.
Now, it's a really hard book to read. It's actually written as an academic book, but the principles of radical candor are quite amazing because it's just a 2x2 grid. The whole book is around this 2x2 grid. And the two dimensions of it are, do managers or leaders care personally, or are they just not caring, as one dimension? And do they challenge you directly, or do they not challenge you directly? Okay.
Yeah.
If you think about managers and people you've met over time, if you've got a leader who cares about his team or her team and challenges them, so makes them think, makes them do things, that's called radical candor, because that's what the whole book's about. It's about getting you to a point of radical candor where you can be honest with the team member and challenge them, and they appreciate it because you care. Okay. And then there are other dimensions around that, where people just, and I've dealt with managers who just don't care and don't challenge. And then, so they're not helping their team grow. They're not showing any emotion towards the team, and it's a wonderful book about understanding how to be a leader.
Awesome.
The second book, which is really weird, is called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Okay, by Robert Pirsig. It's been a book, it was probably written in the psychedelic 60s or the 70s. It's basically a story of a guy who goes mad and then has electroshock therapy, and to wipe out his brain. Okay, that sounds a bit more morbid, but then he goes on a motorbike journey around America with his son, and he teaches his son about life through maintaining your motorbike. But he also has flashbacks to his life as an academic. So he was a lecturer at a university, and he started a class, and at the end of the class he said, give yourself whatever grade you think you deserve. He said, I'm not going to grade you. I want a degreeless, gradeless society where you're motivated by knowledge and not by getting the degree. Okay, so interesting concept. But one of his best sayings in the whole book is that when you see an insane man, what you see is your reflection, a reflection of your belief that they're insane. And I apply that to a lot of things in life, because we'll look at somebody's actions. And you know, around the world, we have Putin and the Ukraine going a bit mad. You know, we had, you know, a radically split America between Trump and Biden, like to a point of, you know, I think lots of families I know don't talk to each other because they were in one or other camp. But the same applies from the book. When you see an insane man, or you call them insane, what you're seeing is your own belief that they're insane. It's not that they are really insane. It's just your belief that they're insane. If you looked at the Maasai warriors in Africa drinking blood of a fresh animal, well, they put a reed into the hind quarter of an animal and tap out blood and then put mud on it as like a Band-Aid. And they drink that blood mixed with milk, sour milk, because it supposedly gives them strength. Now, I was born in Africa, but I still wouldn't do that. You know, you're in the South of America and you'd be going, these guys are nuts. Okay, they're mad, they're insane. But in their society, they're not insane. That's normality. And so that book, you know, although I had to read it 5 or 6 times to actually get the idea of what was in it, really taught me a lot about thinking about life, about that kind of thing. That when we judge people, we're judging them by our own very narrow standards. We're not actually accepting that everybody lives by a different set of norms.
Appreciate it, Mr. Bricker, and hopefully we talk soon.
It's been a lot of fun, Jonathan. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.